I was raised in the outskirts of western Louisiana. Our town was religious, and the crime surge of the 80s meant I spent much of my childhood indoors. My first taste of freedom came on Halloween night, 1987. At 13, I was allowed out until midnight with a few of my closest friends. What convinced my mother was Patrick. Patrick was the 17-year-old brother of my best friend, Marv. Though he intimidated anyone younger, he was a good student and devout Christian, and adults adored him. Against his will, he'd be joining us for the night. We watched the first half of Friday the 13th, Part 6 in Marv's basement on a grainy VHS. Looking back, I'm sure I thought at the time that movie would be the scariest thing that night. When Patrick entered, our laughter stopped mid-sentence. He wasn't tall but carried himself like he was. I didn't like him, but his presence couldn't spoil my mood that night. After Marv's parents kicked us out, we went trick-or-treating through the neighborhood. There were about 5 or 6 of us, excluding Patrick. I knew all the others from school or church, except Lenny, Rob's little brother. He was probably only 7 or 8. I remembered he was in a clown costume. Apart from Lenny, the only other costumes I recalled were mine and Marv's. We both dressed as Ghostbusters, and I brought a black painted vacuum cleaner to complete it. It was after 10, once the trick-or-treating was done. That maybe 1 or 2 of us broke off to head home. We were all laughing and joking, high on candy, not noticing that Patrick was leading us farther away from the rows of white houses. The streetlights grew more spaced out, then disappeared entirely. Our laughter faded, replaced by the crunch of dead leaves beneath our feet and the distant, rhythmic croak of bullfrogs. The air grew thick with the stench of stagnant water and decaying plants. I remember Marv nudging me, his grin slipping for the first time all night. "Dude," he whispered, "where the hell is he taking us?" There was a small, marshy clearing by the bayou's edge. Thick, knotted roots served as makeshift seats, which Patrick directed us to. Confused, we settled in a half-circle around him and watched, wide-eyed, as he pulled a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and took a drag. He blew smoke into Marv's face before speaking. He told us he had a story to share, a local legend every kid in town should know. We listened closely as he began telling us about Leatherskin. The tale has stuck with me, and I'll try to recount it as faithfully as I can. I may miss a few details, it's been 38 years, but this will be the most accurate version of the myth online. As far as I know, anyway, Leatherskin was born sometime in the late 40s or early 50s. His body was deformed, with coarse, brown calluses spreading like mycelium. His eyes, a pus-like color, were mere pinpricks, and his teeth, too sharp for breastfeeding, were his first set. The town's pastor, his father, feared his son was a satanic curse, a punishment for his own past sins. Ignoring his sick wife's pleas, the pastor took his newborn into a shadowy part of the swamp and left him there, among the moss, to die. By this point, Patrick had already captured my attention. At 13, I had heard the name Leatherskin before, whispered by a kid on the playground when I was younger. He said he was coming to get me. But I didn't know what it meant. It was part of the local myths I knew nothing about. I didn't even know what Leatherskin looked like. That Halloween night, I was thrilled to finally learn, unaware, the pastor left his unwanted infant crying near a crumbling shotgun house. The house, sinking into the bayou, was home to an old woman with dementia. She followed the cries and found the baby, taking him in her arms to quiet him. That night, she brought him home and raised him as her own. For years, she fed and cared for him, doing her best to shield him from harm. The elderly woman could barely speak, and with no human company, Leatherskin grew up without learning any language. His diet was raw seabird and swamp creatures, until he reached puberty. By 13, Leatherskin stood almost 7 feet tall, and started sneaking into town. He'd wander through backyards at night, stealing family pets. This became his new routine, but as he grew, so did his hunger. In the mid-1960s, a little girl chased a butterfly into the swamp. She was never seen again. From here on, all sympathy drained from the tale of Leatherskin. After tasting the flesh of a child, there was no return. Children began to vanish at a rate far beyond the national average. When scraps of human remains surfaced, townsfolk claimed alligators were to blame. The town organized hunts, killing many reptiles, but Leatherskin stayed hidden. Parents stopped letting their kids play outside, especially near the bayou. Leatherskin had to creep deeper into the village, sometimes even breaking into homes. After one of the Calloway twins vanished from a schoolyard, no one blamed gators anymore. They nailed their windows shut. By now, he spent much of his time in the water, crawling from root to root through the muddy shallows. To anyone passing by, Leatherskin might have appeared like a drifting log or a lurking gator. Few would realize how close they'd come to dying. A couple of hunters may have seen the collapsing cabin he called home. It lay half submerged where swamp met bayou. Built by the adoptive mother's father in the 1870s or 80s, it once stood on dry ground near a lazy riverbank. If things had gone differently, it could have become a town instead of the one I grew up in just a mile north. After segregation ended, and right after Governor Wallace lost the '68 election, racial tensions in Louisiana ran wild. More sightings, and even a grainy photo, spurred wild headlines in local papers about a Creole cannibal hiding in the swamps. The story fed fear, and one humid July evening, a racist mob gathered. With the sheriff's men beside them, they went into the swamp by foot and boat, finding Leatherskin's rotting home. Inside was the senile old woman who raised him. She was still alive but silent, just as she'd been for 2 years. Leatherskin had kept her alive, cleaned, and fed. But she wasn't the only one in that shack. Guided by a foul stench, they searched the upper floor. The wooden structure was falling apart, and so were its secrets. There, they found dozens of tiny corpses, most stripped to bare bone. During the questioning, the elderly woman sadly passed. What followed came from the only man who lived through that night, once he regained the ability to speak days later. Surrounded by journalists in his hospital room, he explained that not long after, the cabin's door was blasted from its frame. A figure stormed in and ripped the posse apart, shrugging off bullets like they were pebbles. The lone witness, a young assistant from Rubio's hardware store, survived only by diving through a moldy, splintering window. Behind him, screams filled the air as he sprinted, soaked in blood, into the dark tangle of weeds. In his panic, he twisted his ankle and crawled onto a patch of moss under the moonlight. There, he was discovered by a police boat from the search party, with a stunned deputy at the helm. He was rushed back to town in silence. When a second team came upon the ruined cabin, they discovered the torn remains of the men, scattered in pieces. The locals torched the place, and as flames consumed it, the weak-old structure gave way and sank into the dark swamp. No one truly knew what became of Leatherskin, but even now, our quiet town ranks among those with the highest rate of missing persons in the continental U.S. Some claim Leatherskin still roams the marsh, lurking and feeding. At least, that's the tale Patrick gave us that night. After finishing his story, Patrick studied our faces, searching for belief or doubt. I saw little Lenny trembling beside me, gripping his clown mask, scanning the trees like he expected something to leap out. I didn't know whether to believe it all, but the way Patrick had told it made it feel too real to dismiss. Maybe if I had truly believed, I wouldn't have cheered when Patrick casually proposed we head deeper into the swamp to find Leatherskin ourselves. I'd always longed for an adventure like in the movie Stand By Me, and with less than an hour before midnight. I jumped to my feet in excitement. Patrick slung an arm over my shoulders and called out to the others, daring them to come too. I immediately regretted being so eager, because only a few minutes later, we were wading deeper into the bayou. A couple of kids chose to turn back toward the town, following the trail home. Some of us carried flashlights from our cautious parents, and those little beams, mixed with moonlight slipping through the branches, lit our way ahead. We stuck to the raised patches of dry ground where we could. Still, my jeans were getting damp at the cuffs, the wet creeping up with every step. Marv and I hung back together, cracking jokes and laughing like idiots. The air buzzed with noise, insects, frogs, and the slow trickle of the bayou nearby. Then, without warning, Patrick raised his hand and told us to stop. We froze and glanced around, confused, searching for what he'd seen. Slowly, he turned to face us with a crooked grin. "I saw something," he said. "Down by the creek." His eyes were bright, and his voice held a tension that sent a chill through me. "It's leather skin." Patrick suddenly bellowed. Lenny made a soft choking sound, his little hands shaking as his brother nudged him forward. Patrick noticed the exchange and, clearly enjoying the effect he had, decided to up the scare. Patrick smirked and said something like, "You're the youngest. Leatherskin's gonna come for you first." We all latched onto it, teasing and chanting, begging the poor kid to edge closer to the swampy water. Scared stiff but more afraid of us, Lenny obeyed. Dressed in that ridiculous clown getup, white with scattered red and blue dots, he took a few shaky steps ahead. Our voices rose into wild, howling laughter. I even shouted, just to scare him, "Oh my God, is that Leatherskin?" He spun around too fast, nearly slipping into the water. His painted face was streaked with tears now, mouth quivering. "Stop it. You're not funny," he shrieked. That line. I'll never forget it. Because it was the last thing he ever said. Suddenly, a wave of water burst over the narrow stone bank. Something huge struck Lenny, teeth already sunk into his hidden legs. He let out a cry, high and pained, and hit the ground hard. He was being yanked backward into the swamp. All of us just froze. Not even Patrick or Marv moved. But Rob, Lenny's brother, bolted toward the water, trying to pull him back. That broke the spell. We all ran after him, yelling, grabbing Rob before he could dive in. Together, soaked and stumbling, we watched as Lenny vanished beneath the water's dark skin. It wasn't leather skin, it was an alligator. The beast started thrashing, spinning with Lenny clenched in its jaws. We could still hear him scream, again and again, his voice bursting above the water only to vanish each time it pulled him under. That scream. It still haunts me. Still echoes when I close my eyes. The last of him rose in a trail of bubbles. In under a minute, maybe even less, the churning froth had calmed. We all silently watched the ripples drift away, disappearing into the mangrove maze. Rob dropped beside me and broke down, sobbing quietly into his palms. Patrick was gulping for breath behind us, and when I turned, I saw him walking away, back toward the trail. Marv and I pulled Rob up, unsteady and shaking, and hurried after him. When we caught up, Patrick spun around and hissed that we couldn't tell anyone about what happened. I agreed without a second thought, and Marv did too, but we both knew Rob wouldn't stay quiet. Patrick exhaled sharply, then grabbed Rob by the arm and pulled him aside. I looked at Marv for some kind of clue, but he only gave a clueless shrug. A few minutes later, they returned. Rob was a wreck, crying even harder than before. Patrick wiped at his own face and said nothing. When I got home, it was 15 minutes past midnight. My mom could tell something was off right away. She asked what was wrong, but I just mumbled something about being exhausted and how it was way past bedtime. She let it go. I curled up and cried silently under the blankets, and sometime before sleep claimed me, I heard sirens in the distance, probably heading toward Rob's house. The next morning, my mother sat on the edge of my bed and gently told me Lenny was missing. Her voice was distant, heavy. Then she asked if I knew anything. I lied. I told her no, and then silence. She leaned over, hugged me close. I cried into her shoulder. Eventually she gave me a tired smile, brushed my hair back, and left the room. They never found Lenny. Not his body, not a shred of clothing. Nothing. Rob and I didn't hang out much after that. From what my parents said, his family crumbled under the weight of the loss. Marv and I stayed close, all the way until I moved to Baton Rouge at 19. I rarely went back home. My mother passed recently, we hadn't spoken in years. My sister handled the funeral. She lives in the old house now with her own kids. I stayed with her for a little while to help mourn and finally got to know my nieces and nephews properly. A few days back, I wandered into the old store I used to work in during the summer of '90. The place hadn't changed much. That's when I ran into him. I nearly didn't recognize him, but he knew me. Rob. Same name. Same face, just older. He was stocking shelves in aisle 3, his hands shaking. The wedding ring on his finger was far too loose. His eyes still carried that haunted look. Guilt clung to him like moss. We talked. Promised to catch up again someday. Said goodbye. I still don't know how much Rob ever told his folks. I don't know if he ever forgave himself for what happened. I don't even know if I have, so this is me, finally saying it. I don't know if Leatherskin's real. But I told my nieces and nephews the story, anyway, hoping to keep them away from the swamp. There are gators in that water. I'm sure that's what killed Lenny that night, I mean. What else could it have been?